Hello and welcome back to another episode of AzUpdate. I'm Anthony Bartolo, joined today by Pierre Roman. Pierre, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm a little bit upset. I made a big mistake. So apparently, only North America moved forward with the time zone change in terms of daylight savings time. And I forgot to update the schedule for Sarah, who is supposed to also be joining us on the show today. So Sarah is unaware that we're actually an hour earlier than we were last week, because in Europe they haven't done daylight savings time. They changed it a different time. So definitely my mistake. Apologies to Sarah. She's unable to join us for the show today because its scheduling is different. But we have producer Pierre on the show, which is awesome. Yes, I know it's a big mistake on my fault. I did not realize that
Mea culpa.
Europe does not change in terms of time zone change. So apologies. We're actually an hour earlier now in Europe for the next. When do they change? Do you know when they change in Europe?
I have no idea. DST or daylight saving times is different across different countries, across different regions, for us in Canada, across different provinces. So it's a bit of a crapshoot to try to figure out who's doing it and who's not doing it. There's actually a lot of talk about stopping they like leaving it to daylight savings or leaving it to like
one or the other.
Yeah, because really, it was something that was set up to get the farmers more daylight. Well, just get up earlier because the sun doesn't change. It's like anyway. I'm missing the point of what daylight saving is, other than to screw up with our schedules and our sleep patterns.
Well, again, big apologies to Sarah Lean. Apologies for that. Should have known in terms of scheduling that Europe is different. J-Shock mentions in the chat that it's in 2 weeks, and then the European Union will be in line with us in regards to daylight savings time, so that hopefully this won't happen again. Sarah's actually going to be on assignment for the next 2 weeks. She's got a couple projects on the go with the CAF team. So we'll actually have a couple guest hosts the next 2 shows. And then Sarah will join us back on the show. So thank you, Producer Pierre, for stepping in last minute. Let's just say a quick... Oh, sorry. Go on.
I was going to say, I might have to rely on you. I didn't go through all of the show notes.
It's okay. We'll wing it. We'll wing it. And the people in the chat room will help out as well. So hello to Robert Jr. We have Jay Shock, aka Producer Steve. We have Paul Jensen online. A lot of people chatting on there already in regards to the excitement around the show and what we're going to be talking about. I quickly wanted to cover your new show that's in conjunction with Jared or Producer Steve that you have both
it's Producer Pierre and Steve, the audio guy.
Is that? Or we're going by Steve the audio, but he does the visual too, though.
Yeah, I know, but he's always been known as Steve the audio guy.
All right. And he's reminding
and he's going to correct us in the chat room whether or not it's correct. And yes, Jared, we are testing in production.
We are testing in production right now, yeah. So tell us a little bit about the show.
Well, the show is about many things. It's about streaming. It's about recording at home. It's about technology in general. I'm sure at some point we're going to talk about Windows. We're going to talk about Azure. We're going to talk about IT Pro stuff. But it's not necessarily just about the IT Pro business. It's because I help produce this show. Jared helps produce Patch and Switch. We've done a lot of watch parties for Ignites and pre-Ignites and post-Ignite shows over the past few years. And every once in a while, we want to try something like a virtual whiteboard, like the video from Hanselman on using a tablet or a Surface Book in my case, and Microsoft whiteboard to basically turn an OBS feed into a virtual light board. But sometimes you want to test things with, like during a stream, because sometimes on your own machine doesn't look exactly the same as when you're going across the wire. So we decided to have a show where we can talk about the different things that we're trying about gear for people who are interested in terms of like the lighting, cameras, setup that we have, and try some stuff, but try it in production. So
I thought it was really cool. I thought it was, in the fact that you were going behind the scenes, showing how a lot of the producing is done, a lot of the technology, and it's, applicable to a lot of us right now that are speaking in virtual conferences and online conferences. The tips and tricks that you shared, both you and Jared, are applicable to, if you want to jazz up your presentation, if you want to provide that oomph or impact in terms of your delivery. What was shared last week, and you'll have the show this week is Patch and Switch, so you'll have the show again next week. It's really impactful in regards to your delivery mechanisms when you're delivering in a virtual conference.
Yeah. Well, we're this is what we're hoping for, and hopefully people it resonates with people. If not, if it's not your cup of tea and you're not planning on streaming, well, we will be talking about other things at some point.
So let's get started with the news. And the first item to talk about today is the Azure Availability Zones coming to more regions.
Yes.
Gary, you want to take this one?
Sure. Are you going to share the screens?
Yeah, I'll do all the screen sharing. So you just talk away.
All right. So Azure Availability Zones. I've had that conversations with customers in the past where not every region had availability zones, and availability zones is within a data center or within a series of data centers within a region where they're configured, where there's at least two or three distinct zones within those. So a separate power, separate network, separate everything, so that when you're having an application or a workload that is split across availability zones, when you pick your availability zones to deploy your cluster or your workload, if one of those, like network, power, cooling, etc., goes down or has some issues, you can fall back onto the other. And now we've committed to expand that availability zones to more region. In fact, they've committed that by the end of 2021, every country in which we operate Azure regions will deliver Azure Availability Zones for their customers. So it's a big deal. It's kind of like we've committed because it's been asked by customers for a long time. So we've said, yep, all right, we're doing it. We had been doing it on newer data centers. So the new ones that we are announcing, we've been basically taking that, but now we're going back and all the ones that we had missed. So for example, Canada East and Canada Central, in our case for Anthony, are now going to be, by the end of the year, have the availability zones that they're looking for.
And what's exciting is that, our friends south of the border in Brazil have received availability zones. And I know they're a big user of Azure. And so that availability made available to them. I think oil and gas is big in Brazil, are taking advantage of that now. And more will be made available. We'll keep an eye on it. And as availability zones become available into specific regions, we'll share that with everybody in terms of what region is being lit up. Definitely excited that it's coming to Canada. I know we don't have it yet, but it's something that, a lot of the financial sector here has been very eager for. It's interesting that, we're doing this now, and I'm thinking that going forward, I think you mentioned this, any new data center that we'll be launching will automatically now include availability zones.
Yeah, it's part of the baseline, if you will, now. But at the beginning, it wasn't really so much because we were more talking about the zone redundant services. So if you're doing something in Canada East, for example, your redundant region would be Canada West. But now within regions, we're going to have availability zones. In some cases where in a zone that has multiple data center, it's a little easier to implement because you already have that physical separation. But in regions where it's a large single data centers, now you have to reformat the data center itself to kind of introduce that separation within a single physical data center. So It's not as easy. It's not as straightforward as you would think, but we are committed to getting it done across all of our regions by the end of 2021.
So let's continue on with the news. Next up is the availability now of alerting in terms of budgeting for your Azure spend. We talked about this before in regards to governance and controlling in terms of what people can set up in terms of resources, and you're governing over the ability to spin up specific VMs or specific resources required to do your day-to-day operations. Obviously, everybody wants to do the most expensive one, thinking that's going to best fit their application. But with governance, you can control that. Now there's a new functionality being available to cost management on Azure Cost Management that you can set up alerts. And what the alerts do is that you can now set up budgets for your organization in terms of spend, and then be alerted in terms of a threshold that you set when somebody is about to close in on that spend or that allotted budget for your cloud instance. This is really, really well done in the fact that I can now be notified to say, hey, this individual is going to be at this spend very shortly, and it's going to cause the budgets to go out of whack. Also allows you to do the triangulation in terms of, well, who's spending what, and why is their spend going overboard, and do I have to adjust my budgets based on needs? So if accounting during a busy season requires that additional oomph in terms of processing power, to have that allotted in the budget so that you can go through and make sure that the allotted budget for compute or resources available on Azure is specific to each tailored need of each department inside of an organization, and have that alert mechanism made available not only to the IT professionals, but also to the business decision makers, to have that understanding in terms of how the spend is going and how close we're getting to the threshold of what's been budgeted for the spend itself for cloud computing services. Pierre, thoughts?
Well, I really love that. And actually, I wish that it had been available when I was running my last demo subscription. It's not just about the budget itself, because the budget is great, being able to allocate some money. It's the alerting because sometimes you would either forget about a part, or as you set the budget and your SREs or your developers or IT pros deploy the workloads, sometimes it doesn't actually deploy. There's changes that happen in production where, I don't know, like another machine jumps up, or whether or not as you're deploying, if there's a quota issue, you say, well, I'm just going to get a bigger machine and we'll address later. And then all of a sudden your cost estimates are out of whack, and then you get a notification. It doesn't block anything, but it basically tells you that something is off versus what you had planned. So you can go back and check and cover it. In my case, when I did a demo where I deployed in a scale set of machines, and just for shock and awe during the demo, I picked a G2 machine, which at the time, I think, or G5, I think at the time was like $8,000 a month. And I forgot to turn them off after the demo, and I just closed my laptop, said, thank you very much. And I walked off the stage and left 10 machines at $8,000 a month running in my demo subscription. Which was not free, by the way. It was still billed to our cost center. So at the end of the month, I got a fairly nasty email from, well, not nasty. He was really good about it, but it was like, hey, why the hell is there a $80,000 bill on your account that's supposed to be $400 a month? If I had had notification, I would have found out.
So Andrew McCullum joined us in the chat and made a good point. Maybe good to budget the Azure Sentinel. I bring that up only because in scenarios like Azure Sentinel, when you're doing your security spec for your organization, you should have that budgeted in terms of a separate bucket in terms of your organization's security. It shouldn't just be as part of the resources spun up based on your applications or the services that you run. You should have that understanding. Okay, so if I've deployed Sentinel in my organization, there's a reason as to why, and the budgeting spend for the Sentinel being utilized is X, and it should be separate. And it should be, the big thing here with this is specifically Azure Cost Management and the alerting capabilities made for it, is to keep the business decision maker in the know. right? So perfect example is your example in terms of spinning up the G2s, and it's an $8,000 a month budget requirement. And then there's the sticker shock when it comes up at the end of the month saying, whoa, what is this bill, right? Yeah. Can you imagine the business decision maker looking at that bill going, what is this? I had no idea this was coming through. What's going on? In using Azure Cost Management with alerting, you can now keep the business decision maker in tune what's going on in terms of budget spend. So stuff like Azure Sentinel doesn't become a surprise when there's a spike, because there could be an attack that's happening at your organization, which is incurring additional costs, right? The business decision maker would be aware, and there would be no sticker shock at the end of the month saying, well, how come we spent all this money? And then you have to do all this investigation, right?
That applies to all services.
Correct.
Because I've also had discussions with log analytics, because we recommend a single log, as little number of log analytics workspace as possible, because the ingestion of the data is the cost. That's the expensive part. And if you're doing a hub and spoke environment, you might think, okay, I'm ingesting a terabyte of data that's going to cost me X, but really, because it's hub and spoke, you're doubling that amount. And if you're not realizing that, because I'm ingesting it twice, there's going to be a charge for that.
So now Andrew brings up a good question in regards to what habits that should he then look at in regards to his use of Sentinel. I'd have to investigate further, but I think you can actually manage your log analytics piece in terms of ingestion, because that is the most expensive part, is the ingestion of the data itself. You could, lessen the frequency of that ingestion, but that does then, provide a bigger attack plane for your organization, right? It's a balance. So you have to make sure that you're still adhering to what your organization's security requirements are, without, going overboard in terms of how much data or how frequently are you consuming that data for security analysis.
Yeah, and Sentinel uses log analytics workspace to store the information. And I think is in April sometime. So actually, I just had a blog post this week and a video with the PM of the Azure Monitor agent, basically how we're collecting the info for Sentinel, for performance monitoring, for Azure Monitor, for all these. The model is changing, where you're going to have more granular control over how and what information you're actually ingesting into your log analytics. So go check it out, and you'll be able to tweak, because you don't need every performance monitor on a machine if you're only monitoring, let's say, CPU and disk. So you can check that out.
All right, next up in the news.
Yes.
Make workloads on AMD-backed virtual machines. Pierre, do you got this one?
Yeah, sure. Actually, you have the wrong.
No, that's actually the screen, but it's okay. So,
okay.
So the big thing here is the Mark Ruzinovich announcement.
Yes. So we are now providing a confidential platform that you can deploy your code to. That is AMD-backed, so it's the new EPYC 7003 processor series, and it's in a new approach that complements what we've already got in terms of confidential computing solutions, such as confidential containers for Azure Kubernetes services, and that opens the possibility to create new applications without requiring code modification to turn them instantly into something that is a lot more secure.
And that's the big thing, right? There's no code modification required. This is inherently secure to the virtual machine itself, based on the 7003 EPYC processor provided by AMD in partnership with Microsoft. This is something where, Microsoft is trying something new based on security requirements that have been put forth by organizations. And so there is a current private preview being made available for people to test this out. We say this on the show numerous times. Hey, if you want to have your input on the services that are being put forth by Microsoft, definitely jump into opportunities like this to have your voice heard. So this link is made available on IT Ops Talk. Pierre is showing the link right now, aka.ms/AzUpdate show. All the links for today's show is provided in this blog post We have one every week, every Friday, that shares all the links that we've talked about on the show. Sign up for this private preview. It is limited. There's not availability for everyone because it is a private preview. But if you have something in your organization or there's a service in your organization that requires this type of enhanced security, definitely check this out and get into the private preview early.
Well, if you can't get into the private preview, then keep an eye on it, because the next step is going to be the public preview. And then you can basically jump onto that. Yes, very, very interesting.
So I got a quick question for you, Pierre. In terms of backup, back in the DLT days, what was the longest time that your backups would survive on those tapes?
Oh, hard to tell, because back then we didn't do as many test restores as we should have. So at the end of the week, you would take the box of tape, or on Monday morning after the weekend full backup, you would take the box of tape and you would take it to the bank or to your offsite storage. In some case was like my basement versus the office downtown. And then you would basically store those tapes, and you had the grandfather, father, son kind of rotation. How often did you actually go back and say, is last year's backup good? So,
well, that's just it, right?
I'd
have from my backups, I would have a backup for the year, a backup for the month, and a backup for the day, right? The daily one would be doing a test infrequently. It wouldn't be done every day. It would be done every other day or what have you. The monthly one would be checked, and the yearly one would be checked, but only checked once, and it wouldn't be checked again. It would be in a safe. If you've seen me speak about backup, we've probably heard the horror story of one of my friends who used to take the tape, put it in the safe at their home, which was magnetically locked, and then the tape would be erased, right? The reason we're talking about this, I know.
Put a big magnet on it and see if it works.
But it's not the first time I've heard that, right? Like it's not the first time I heard that. Then there's the introduction of Azure Backup, and there's taking the information, backing it up off site, making the data available if you want to spin it up in the test area for production applications to be tested out before being put to production. So much goodness in terms of Azure Backup. Now there's a new functionality in terms of long-term backup retention for Azure SQL Managed Instance is currently in public preview. And what this is you have the availability to store Azure SQL Managed Instance in a separate repository for up to 10 years. Yep. So this is long-term storage. If you need sales data, if you need specific technical diagrams, if you need architectural data, all that information in long-term retention backup for 10 years, held up in the cloud in a separate repository from your production or testing environment, or even your Azure backup environment, so that you can have and go to at any time. Obviously, you can still do your testing. It is only currently available or in general preview for SQL Managed Instances. Microsoft is working to broaden this capability across a plethora of SQL offerings that Microsoft does have. Pierre's shaking his head. He's taking a drink. So it's coming. But again, it is currently in general preview. If you have a requirement or need for this, definitely go check it out, test it, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, that's a really, really important long-term, especially for compliance issues and for historical data type of, especially in an area where, for GDPR, for example, somebody calls you and says, I want you to remove my information from your environment. So you got to go back to all your backups and be able to do that. Also, the fact that it's in the cloud and you don't have to worry about storing it, like the physical storage part of it, is also really, really important. And the fact that now with Azure Backup Center, which eventually will surface that environment, you'll only get one place to manage all of your backup, whether they're the long-term storage, which are basically on like deep cold storage, meaning performance is out the window. You're not You're not looking at very high throughputs, but it is there for a long period of time. So really cool, really important. I used to say that used to be the tag on my personal blog: relax, but make a backup.
Paul Jensen on chat makes mention he works in a very regulated industry, and longer retention is key to us. So it's something, Paul, definitely go and check it out in regards to the general preview. Provide your thoughts in terms of its capability. I was thinking, 10 years worth of backup on, financials. I'd hate to see my numbers for device spend and tech spend.
Yeah, it also depends on your industry. So
Right.
Paul works in a highly regulated industry. You're talking about financials. So financials in Canada, it's 7 years worth of data that you have to retain. So
correct.
It all depends. IT pros and operations folks really need to be in touch with if they're working for a large corporation or any kind of corporation that has compliance, have to meet regularly with the lawyers of the company to figure out what your compliance footprint looks like, so you can actually manage it in a way that you retain compliance across all your workloads.
Let's continue on. So next up are events that are coming up. First up, Hello World. Hello World is a new daily show put on by our team. So all of us, we're cloud advocacy team. It is on at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every day on Learn TV, aka.ms/Learn TV. It's a new show that talks about everything that's happening at Microsoft, everything that's happening in terms of Microsoft's impact around the world, how the world impacts Microsoft, everything from, what we're doing in technology from an IT pro, developer, and end user, machine learning, governance, you name it. Every show is different. Every show has 3 to 4 segments, which talks about everything that's going on.
And they have also a plethora of hosts.
Also today, as we mentioned earlier, it is a fortnight, so that means that Patch and Switch is on today, which means that testing and production will happen next week.
That's right.
But we all jump on the Patch and Switch, so we always have fun in the chat room. So definitely join us for Patch and Switch today. Last but not least, in terms of events, the digital event for the Azure VMware Solution digital event is next week. So on the 23rd of March, if you haven't registered yet, if you are using Azure VMware Solution, do check out this event. Jason Zander is the keynote speaker for this event, but you do need to register to be able to participate. You can watch the event without registering, but if you have burning questions you need to ask, definitely register for the event so that you can have your voice heard and possibly have a question asked to Jason Zander.
Yeah, and if you are using our VMware solution on Azure and you have questions, you can always go to our Discord server, because we have Shannon and Jeremiah Dooley, which basically run or cover that area of our team on our Discord server. You can ask questions directly to them. And
now Pumala Schmidt will also be answering questions as well. And she was doing that before, but she's now going to be focusing a lot more on VMware and the Azure VMware solution, which we're very excited about because of the amount of history she has in the background. Let's talk about the Microsoft Learn module of the week. We have 1 minute left. Create an enterprise scale architecture in Azure. If you're looking to migrate portions of your organization to Azure, to the cloud, here's the best way to do it in terms of learning the uptick of the tool that's made available. This cloud adoption framework tool is something where you can go through hands-on labs to learn about the functionality to move your organization to the cloud in a hybrid or full cloud implementation. Whew, Pierre, it's been a busy show. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
At Wired Canuck, pretty much anywhere on socials.
And if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me at Wireless Life on Twitter. Hey, everybody, thank you for joining us on the show. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.